Hello and welcome to the Hymn of the Week, episode 5. It's hard to believe, Harry, that we've had 5 episodes already, or 4 already, and this is the 5th one. And we're looking forward to being enriched by another hymn and hymn story today. So we want to thank our listeners or viewers for tuning in over these weeks. I know that some people have written in to you, Harry, and have seen, or we've heard some encouraging responses to this. So that's gratifying for us, but it's mostly encouraging to know that these stories are still meaningful and that songs are powerful in our lives. So we always begin, or at least include, a scripture passage of the week and try to make them link into the song story. And our passage this week is definitely in that theme. So I am going to read a passage from Mark chapter 6, a few verses starting in verse 47. Here's our scripture for the week. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed.
The opening lines of this great hymn by Horatio Spafford begin with two contrasting images. The first, a deep flowing river, when peace like a river. The second, a great storm, when sorrows like sea billows roll. Horatio Spafford was acquainted with both, peace and sorrow. It is striking how often great hymns of faith emerge from the crucible of sorrow. Horatio Spafford was a lawyer, businessman from Chicago. He was a devout believer, a lay leader in the Presbyterian Church, a close friend and supporter of D.L. Moody, the great American evangelist. He was a wealthy businessman. He had invested heavily in properties in the great city of Chicago. But sorrow struck at the height of his career. First, in the death of his 4-year-old son in a scarlet fever epidemic. And then a year later, he lost most of his wealth in the great Chicago fire of 1871. Needing a vacation for rest and renewal, he booked a European family vacation for his family in November of 1873. He was detained for business reasons, but sent his wife and 4 daughters on ahead, planning to follow in a few days. But on November 22nd, 1873, tragedy struck. Their ship collided with a British vessel, and within 12 minutes, the ship sunk, and over 200 people died, among them his 4 daughters. The rescuers found his wife, Anne, adrift on a plank, unconscious but alive. They took her to a port in Wales, and from Wales she cabled her husband, saying, "Saved alone. What shall I do?" Horatio Spafford left by ship immediately to join his wife. When his ship approached the place of tragedy, the captain summoned him to the deck. And there he stood in tears and in deep contemplation. Then he raised his head and said, I cannot lose my faith in God. He then went to his quarters and began to pen the words of this great hymn, It is Well with My Soul. The tone of the hymn is reminiscent of the passage in Hebrews 6:19. We have this hope as an anchor of the soul, firm and secure. The refrain, It is well, is heard over and over again. It speaks of the wellness of the soul, a soul at peace, a soul with hope, a kind of wholeness that remains even in times of trial. He speaks of that wholeness, that wellness throughout the hymn. In verse 1, he says it's a wellness not dependent on circumstances. When peace like a river attends to my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is a wellness deeply rooted in the atoning work of Christ, that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It's a wellness that is profoundly personal. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. It's a wellness that is hopeful forever. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall return. Even so, it is well with my soul.
That hymn stirs us all. It's powerful. And, in these days, though some of us may feel the tragedy that Horatio Spafford did with our situations. We face very grave difficulties, but the pandemic is also a storm of sorts, and it is good for us to hear these words that it is well, no matter what. That can sound trite, but it's powerful when you hear those words deeply. So thanks for telling us that story, Harry. And now we're going to enter into the emotion and the words through the music played by Calvin and Heather. Thanks so much, Calvin and Heather, for always putting the music together. And we now turn our hearts and our ears to listen.